I want to ask you what you were doing in acting before this movie came along.
Oh, only comedy, Shakespeare plays at the school, local school plays. We have an acting club, and I was very animated and expressive, so they liked me. I was really actually doing it for fun, never thought it would be a career.
How did this part come along? How did you find out about Wonderstruck?
For my drama teacher. My drama teacher at school saw a casting call. They were looking for people to audition. She thought of me and sent the email to me and my mom and said, "I think Millie should really try out for this." And so I did. I said to mom, "Okay, I will."
The director of the movie, Todd Haynes, tells a story about watching your audition tape and how moved he was by it, that he starts crying just talking about it. What did you send to Todd that made him want to cry?
Well, really, how do I say this? I'm only had experience on stage, right? So, what I thought was I would, just read the book and think about my favorite actors and what I've seen and how they portray different emotions. And then I just got up and stood in the corner, looked in the camera, looked through the book, the script that they sent me, and went outside, practiced the fall. That was part of the audition, and part of the audition was an introduction of yourself, telling a little bit about yourself. And I didn't think this would go anywhere, so I just, thought this is fun. I just shot these different scenes, and Mom said, "Let's do it." And she didn't reshoot any of the audition scenes, so I'm glad that Todd was so impressed with it.
What did you think about the book? Because the book is written by Brian Selznick, who is not deaf, but he seems to understand and did a lot of research into deaf culture.
I read the book before I auditioned. Maybe I think I was in fourth grade when I read the book, and I fell in love with it. I just loved the illustrations. I loved the story. I loved the pictures. And it was a different way of telling a story that I thought was really cool. And at first I thought, it has to be the writer has to be deaf. They couldn't possibly understand the life of a deaf person. And I, started to research him, and I found out that he wasn't deaf, and I was so surprised. And I read the intro to his book, and he talked about his research that he had done, and that he has a lot of deaf friends, that he met with a lot of deaf people, and really did his background research. And he really found it, and it had a huge impact on me. It was really, he's an amazing man, just yeah, amazing.
Something that is very important to the book and is important to your character is the change in deaf culture, the way in which people who couldn't hear were treated back in the 1920s, and the importance of the emergence of sign language as opposed to lip reading. Did you know about that history, about the way in which deaf people were treated and kind of cast aside back in the 20s?
I knew a little bit about it. I do because I went to a deaf school. I was raised in a deaf school, so they taught us about part of our culture and our history, and also talked about the comparison of today and what we have for us today, and what we had in the past. And in the past, it was very oppressive. When a child was signing, they would slap you with a ruler, slap your hands. Your hands would be bleeding if you were signing. And I learned that imagine being a child going through that experience, and they would secretly come together and sign under a table. It was taboo. It was forbidden to sign, and I can't imagine why someone would treat other people like that. Just, I don't know. I can't even explain it. I mean, it's so cruel. Just that part of our history is so cruel.
What was it like during the production of the film? Were there other deaf people working on the film? How did you communicate with Todd Haynes and the other actors who are doing the movie with you?
There were several deaf actors in the film besides me. The maid, the speech teacher who comes to the house, um, and who was going to teach speech. I thought that was, and a lot of extras also who were deaf in the film. we communicated using an interpreter. Lynette was one of the interpreters on set. She worked with me and Todd, and she is amazing. I think she's actually perfect. Thank you, Millie.
Were there things about being deaf that you wanted to make sure the film got right, that maybe as written by Todd and Brian, you said might not be the way in which I would behave, the way in which a deaf character may not behave?
No, not really. No, I mean, I really felt like they captured everything about the realities of deaf people. Brian and Todd really made sure they asked other deaf people. They had a consultant on board, and they did a lot of research. And I actually just felt like it was a perfect representation. It was really unbelievable when I saw the film. I felt like they really captured the experience. They really captured what the feeling of a deaf child at that time would be going through, the obstacles that they would have to go through, both in 1927 and 1977, which is vastly different.
Do you think that movies and TV shows and books accurately represent today what it's like to be deaf? When you're looking at images or depictions of people like you or yourself, do you see things that you think are accurate or most of them mistaken in some way?
I mean, to tell you the truth, I haven't seen a lot of deaf actors in television or film. Switched at Birth is one show that I've had exposure to, and that's about it. I haven't seen a lot. I think Switched at Birth does a great job. Um, I think it talks about, the experiences we have and represents them. And, the story is about two parents who are in very different kinds of lifestyles. And one parent has a hearing child and one parent has a deaf child, and they're accidentally switched at birth and then raised in these different households. And the two meet later, the two children meet later and become friends. And then they start seeing what it would be like to be in one other's world. And I think that's cool. And Marlee Matlin also, she's in it, and she's one of the only deaf Oscar winners, and she's an amazing actress. So I think her representation is authentic. But I don't know a lot about other shows with deaf actors in them.
So if people watch this movie and they're hearing, how might you hope they would understand or see deaf people differently?
I hope it shows them that. I hope it shows them that it's really. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just give me a moment to gather my thoughts. There are a lot of hearing parents who have deaf children, and they can't communicate even today. There's still a belief that children should not learn sign language, and that if they learn to lip read and speak, that they'll be able to become more like hearing people, more assimilated. And I see many of my friends who can't communicate with their parents, and I see their frustrations, their sadness. I have a lot of friends that like that in school. So I hope what this movie shows is that parents should learn sign language. And if you have deaf children, you should learn sign language, and so you can communicate with your children. I mean, you can still always teach them to lip read and always teach them alternative methods of communication, but you start with sign language. That's their natural language. That's every deaf child's natural language. And it's okay to be different. It's okay.
Is that also what you hope deaf people will take away from this film? That people who cannot hear will see this film differently, and what do you think they might see differently from people who have hearing?
I think deaf people are going to enjoy the film a lot. I think deaf audiences are going to be very supportive of this film and this project all the way. I I think that I think they're going to I think they're going to be happy by seeing this story on film because it shows it will show other people what their experience is like. And also, hearing people get to go to movies all the time and see themselves represented. We don't get to see ourselves represented so often. So I think it will be very important for the audiences.
Now that you're a deaf movie star, what happens next for you?
Currently, I'm working on a film in production called A Quiet Place with John Krasinski and Emily Blunt. and it's a cool story. We're in the rehearsals right now. We haven't started shooting yet, but that's what we're working on now in New York. We're shooting in upstate New York.
I want to ask you about captioning and about ways in which TV shows and movies are captioned. If you think they do a good job, do they describe music accurately? Are they good about language? Is captioning any good?
It's not bad, but I feel like they don't give us the lyrics to the songs often. That's missing, and and they don't describe sort of what the ambient sounds are, the background noises. Is there chatter on this? Is there background chatter? Or are there horns honking? I want to know what's going on environmentally, not just in the dialogue. I want to know what the setting is. I want to know what's happening in that scene. So.
Have you seen Wonderstruck's captioning? Does it capture the sounds, the music, Carter Burwell's score, the popular songs, the David Bowie song that's being played in the film?
Amazing. I thought it did an amazing job. It included everything, and also that with they captioned the songs, the lyrics, and that was awesome because the closing credits are the Bowie song, and it really it sums up the film, and I thought that was really cool to see, and I think that will be a big impact for the audience too. Um, that and for me it was like, oh, that's why people listen to that song. The lyrics are really cool. So I thought the captions were great in Wonderstruck.
There's a scene in the movie where Ben, the character that you don't play opposite, but that you are somehow connected to, listens to music by putting his hand next to a speaker. Are you able to enjoy some of the music in the film, including the score by Carter Burwell?
I like going to movies and sitting in theaters because it's so loud, right? And then I can experience it. I feel the vibrations. I can feel it in my body. It resonates. That's how I like to experience the music. But sometimes, when I'm at home, I'll turn it up all the way. And I can feel the vibrations. I try to get close up to it and my parents are always going, turn it down, but I also have my iPhone, and I put the speaker on my hand to feel the rhythm, and I like doing that.
When silent movies were being made, there were a lot of deaf actors who worked in silent films because they could be very expressive with their bodies. They didn't have to rely on their voice. Is that something that you think you can learn from because you can't use your voice as an actor? The way you perform with your face, with your eyes, with your body is more important, and maybe you become a better actor that way.
Well, it's funny. When I heard that I got the part, Todd sent me a list of movies to watch before coming, and it was both silent films and some older films. I mean, one of them was Paper Moon and The Wind and a few others. They were really cool. It was very fascinating to watch. It I I don't I think about deaf people, yeah, are more expressive, and we're also bigger in our gestures and our expressions than hearing people and hearing actors, and especially because we're not using dialogue. I think in silent films, they had their animated faces were more amplified, and I think in this film I think you see some of the strengths of silent films and the acting of silent films, but hmm, I
And just like there's probably good and bad actors and good and bad translators for like Spanish, are there good and bad interpreters for American Sign Language?
yeah, I think sometimes that happens. I mean, a lot of people. A lot of people make fun of interpreters. Actually, they tell stories about them about, uh, that they'll try to catch them up, right? With it, like they'll be telling a story about, say, there's a deaf man who has money, and he's he's holding the money for this group, and so the cop won't think that he's the one with the money because he's deaf. They'll think he hasn't done it, and they they take advantage of him by making him the scapegoat. So what they do is they bring in an interpreter the cop brings in an interpreter to interrogate him. Tell us where the money is. Tell us where the money is. And then the guy finally confesses where the money is, and the interpreter finds out where the money is. So, and he doesn't tell the cop where the money is. So he walks away with the money. So we have lots of jokes like that in our community about interpreters.
Millicent.
Nice to meet you as well.